how many children are out of school. We need to do better concerning that, not just the macro numbers, but also profiling every child. So, and I know some member states are already now developing education management information systems with unique identifiers for every child so that they can be traced where they are, why they are there, etc. The last one is to do with partnership, coalition of stakeholders, and this is where the CESA cluster, thematic cluster on early childhood education comes in. So in implementing the Continental Education Strategy, the way we have agreed to move forward is to try and bring as many stakeholders together as possible, because many excellent things are happening in pockets, and yet overall, the overall picture, according to statistics, is dismal. So how can we do better? We need to come together. We need to know who's doing what. I think it's already been mentioned. If someone has developed an intervention in a certain area, why spend so much money doing the same? And then, of course, working towards a common vision, having a common reporting framework, and working to holding each other to account. So there are different clusters in the different thematic areas. Any area you can think of. We don't have one in parents and teachers associations, or teachers are covered, but not parents. Maybe you want to start one in that area. So the one on early childhood was launched in Addis Ababa just last month. Every cluster has its objective. Every cluster selects among themselves, among the different agencies, who will be the coordinating team to help hold each other to account, to help follow up on what you agreed to do, and also therefore bring the reports together so that we can present them to the highest level, the ministers and heads of state. So some of the issues, the objectives are as you would expect, because they're all the things that you've been talking about. It was stakeholders who came together and came up with them. So issue of policy advocacy, communication, issue of research, strengthening partnerships, and so on. And then the cluster has a work plan. Every cluster has a work plan. And some of the areas of activity are to do with mapping what exactly is happening out there. If you're doing something good, do you then rest on your laurels and imagine all is well? Because I've done so well in this country, I've done so well in this corner, I've done so well. But no, we are not yet doing well. There are good things happening here and there. So we must know what they are and where they are, who is doing them, and how we can make that count for more. And the issue of the ECD workforce is there. Developing frameworks. All the good things that you've talked about, that you are doing. You want to tell me 2 minutes? They must influence policy. Because when you have the policy, you are talking about working with government. When you have the policy, then you have something to use to hold government to account. And if that policy has been informed by what you yourselves have determined to be the good in that particular area, then you have nobody to blame if you're not holding yourselves and each other and government to account for implementing. So the next slide. Oh, I could have controlled it myself. Okay. No, I'm not good with technology. I missed it in early childhood. Okay, so that slide is just showing the framework. At the highest level, I don't know if it's completely there. At the highest level, we have a group of 10 heads of state and government who are the champions for education, science, and technology in Africa. It's the first time it's being done. Education has never been championed at such a high level. So we are expecting that if heads of state are championing it, that will attract resources, starting from the local resources, and we'll start seeing government spending more. So you need to know who those 10 are so that you can hold them accountable, because they must be the example. And we must have this peer review mechanism, asking each other, this is what we agreed. Are you spending 1% on research? Are you spending 6% GDP on education, or 20 to 25%, etc. That's the value of that championship. Then below that, there is the Specialized Technical Committee, ministers responsible for education, science, and technology. But in all other sectors, there are such structures. And of course, in early childhood is a multi-sectoral issue. So you will expect that ministers of health also are convened by the African Union Commission, etc. So when you work in partnership with us, it means you're raising your visibility at that political level and are more likely to influence policy in the formal sense of it. The presentation will be available. You can have a look at it. And something else it says is that there is a role for every stakeholder. Member states are, of course, the owners. So they are the ones, when you partner with government, you should find out what are you saying about the AU implementing what you said as Africa. SDGs are very important, but we are part of the global, then we are part of the continental, regional, national, etc., and it all has to count for something. There's a role for regional economic communities. There's a role for partners like yourselves. Accountability. Okay, some of you, I think some of you are from government. So the partners are often guilty of coming up with parallel structures and alternative visions. So partners must align. If you are bona fide partners, you must seek to know what is the existing policy framework, what are the priorities and aspirations, and align. If you're not aligning, then you're not a good partner. And then, of course, participate in the multi-sectoral engagements, supporting capacity building, because some partners are, their niche is in technical expertise. Whatever your niche is, make it count across the board, but also supporting innovation. So what we've done since the launch, we had a very successful event in Dakar on education innovation. And one of the areas of innovation that was presented was early childhood. So we identified innovators, and the top 10, most of them were young people, were given prizes of 100,000, 40,000, 15, and then several of 4,000. And we are connecting them, the winners, with those who would build their capacity in entrepreneurship and business management, but also in packaging the innovations in order to attract resources. So we are doing that, in case you're wondering what is the AU doing about it. And we are going to, we'll have a handbook on education innovation, education innovators, and every 2 years or so it will be updated. So you have a one-stop shop, where you can look to see what are people doing that is making a difference in early learning or whatever else. And then we're going to have an extraordinary summit of the Committee of 10 that I mentioned in Malawi next week. I was there just yesterday to look at the preparations. And then whatever we do also in the clusters, we submit, as I said, to the ministers and eventually to the AU summit. But in the end, it's up to you. You have to be members, because to be members is demonstrating your being a good partner, wanting to align with what Africa is saying are their priorities. And then it's up to you at every level to implement what it is you have agreed to. And the coordinating agency, the African Early Childhood Network, is the coordinating agency for the CESAR Early Childhood Education and Development Network. So they will be coming to you to ask, what have you done according to what we've agreed, and to bring the reports that will go to the highest level. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beatrice. I know lots of people will have probably some question to ask, but and also we looked at the African policy framework, the objective, the strategy, and what's next in relation to early childhood development. But before I call upon the local action to Janet, I want to call on Maggie to maybe communicate the conference communique. So Maggie.
On button, there we go. I just wanted you to come here. Good morning again. So I've been given the task of reading to you the final conference communique. So I'm just going to read it word for word, so no eye contact coming from me for the next 2 minutes or so. So we're calling this the first International Conference on Early Childhood Development, held on 16th to 19th October 2018 at the Safaricom Hotel in Nairobi. This is the final conference communique. All right. Preamble. We, the 800 delegates from 48 countries in Africa, with representation from other continents and over 100 organizations, including government representatives from ministries of education, health, and social protection from across the continent, UN agencies, private sector, philanthropists, donor communities, and academia, congregated at Safaricom Hotel in Nairobi, Kenya on 16th to 19th October 2018 for the first International Conference on Early Childhood Development. The theme of this conference was the Africa we want, a better future now. This is an important 3-day platform for stakeholders in ECD to deliberate on how to make concrete progress in line with the vision and aspirations of the AU Agenda 2063 and Global Sustainable Development Goals. Delegates discussed one of the greatest challenges facing the continent, how to support the proper nurturing of children during the most pivotal days of their lives. We express appreciation to the Government of Kenya for hosting this important conference and the Africa Early Childhood Network for bringing national, regional, and international communities together in Nairobi. In 2015, the global community agreed on the SDGs, several of which address issues related to the development of young children. In May 2018, global institutions launched the Nurturing Care Framework at the World Health Assembly. Components of the Nurturing Care Framework include good health, adequate nutrition, opportunities for early learning, security and safety, and responsive caregiving. The framework seeks to ensure that children not only survive, but also thrive and live to transform their communities. Further, the Nurturing Care Framework is especially important for supporting initiatives targeted at children living with developmental difficulties. Building upon the commitments made by member states in the African Charter for the Rights and Welfare of Young Children in Agenda 2063, the African Union places at the forefront the transformative role of investing and building human capacity. The Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2016 to 2025 identifies pre-primary education as the pillar and future learning and the next frontier if Africa is to realize sustained quality education and training. In recognition of this, the AUC launched the Early Childhood Education and Development Cluster to support achievements of CESA 16 to 25 objectives. We affirm that early years present a time of great opportunity and are decisive for human development. Demographically, the African continent is the youngest in the world and as such holds tremendous promise. Realizing Africa's potential and aspirations depends on the investments that are made today towards the development of Africa's children and young people. We recognize the importance of global and regional deliberations on the Sustainable Development Goals and the African Union Agenda 2063. We are concerned that while much is expected of governments, public investment in the holistic development of young children is persistently low. Considering that ILO UNESCO recommendation on the status of teachers in 1966, Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 4.2 on access to quality early childhood development, care and pre-primary education, and the Global Strategy for women's, children's and adolescents' health, remain relevant in building policies aimed at improving the status of young children. We call upon African member states, ECD stakeholders, and the world at large to, number one, note that the first 1,000 days of a child's life provide a critical window of opportunity for ensuring optimal brain development and strong foundations for success in later years. Number two, recognize the implementation of the nurturing care framework plays a critical role in advancing an achievement of the SDGs 2030 and the Africa Union 2063. Number three, we acknowledge the role of the AU ECD cluster in advancing progress towards achieving better learning outcomes for young children in Africa. Number four, we prioritize early childhood expenditure in national budgetary allocations at national and sub-national levels. Five, invest in ensuring equitable access in high-quality programs and services aimed at improving the health, nutrition, early learning, and care of young children and their families. Number six, develop and implement policies that will safeguard children's access to high-quality, nurturing environments in their early years. Number seven, multi-sectoral and adopt multi-sectoral and interdisciplinary approaches to the implementation of national policies and strategies that promote national coordination mechanism to address child development in a holistic way. Number eight, prioritize young children and families in deprived, emergency, and marginalized contexts. 9, promote working through community systems change agents in order to reach all children, particularly the hardest to reach. Number 10, invest in empowering the early childhood care and development workforce and devise strategies for the provision of appropriate incentives, including competitive remuneration, clear career pathways, and continuous professional development opportunities in order to attract and retain competent workforce across the sectors. And lastly, commit to build an evidence base at the national, regional, and continental levels to guide the development and implementation of policies, systems, and programs. That is our communique. Any questions on this communique? Any questions? Okay. Given that there are not any questions, this communique is adopted as presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It seems to me there's a perfect flow because you well presented your policy framework, and obviously the conference has communicated its intention in a very detailed way. So there's a perfect marriage between your presentation and this communique. So thank you very much. But before we move on to Janet, maybe there are two things in reflection, and I think it's also would lead to Janet, is that all this high-level political policy need to be translated into two areas. One, I think for me, there has to be a reflection into the culture of the languages, the values, and the challenges our communities are facing in the continent. I'm a product of the continent itself, so I've turned out to be okay. And I've done an early learning in a priest school in Ethiopia as a young boy. So, but the continent offers quite a lot of rich experiences for children. Parents have done that. And then at a higher level now, as the continent is focusing on technology, on development, and so on, there has to be call for action to put these things together. So, Janet, maybe I pass it to you and see how these two, perhaps not always mixing worlds, connect, and how do we call for action?
And probably I would stand there, teachers, and in other life, politicians. Okay, yeah, and Daniel is right that often so many things end up being beautiful documents and documentaries about how we had wonderful experiences. But then this comes a time when we ask ourselves, after this conference, so what? We sat here, listened, participated, so what are we calling ourselves to do? And probably at times we say, we can probably not do everything at once. But in about 1 year or 2 years, what can we say that this came from Nairobi? And when I was going through the communique, and also having reflections about what we've sat here doing, I was coming up with 5 things that are do or die for us, in which one I would think for me is the prioritization about financing. So we have to call ourselves to something. Sitting there, I know there are governments, there are people who we will not call to action to lobby, because it is your responsibility to go and make sure that funding is a priority. But there are some people who have to lobby. There are some people who have to, they are friends of power, so they just need to say one word. So what are we saying about that first aspect? That we shall advocate for the prioritization of early childhood expenditure in national budgetary allocations at national and subnational levels. Do we think that is fair? Do we think that is fair? Yes, so that at the time we are meeting next, then we shall see. By the time we met in Nairobi, we were at point X. But as a result of our effort, this is what we are saying as the expenditure for ECD in country X, Y, and Z, and so on and so forth. And number 2, we may not be able to do all that unless we wrap it all around in good policies that are sound because of sustainability issues and also because of long-term funding and planning. And so I think for us, we must call ourselves to number 2, that we shall I'm struggling with words, because when I'm speaking to government, I do not want to tell government to go and advocate. No, go and do. But there are some people here who we must tell them to advocate, is it? So we are committing to developing and implementing policies that will safeguard children's access to high-quality nurturing environments in their early years. And if you want me to give you an example, I will give you an example of a policy and a law. That by the time we are meeting next, we are not going to have any levies at ECD level. That is a policy that we must call ourselves to action to do. And number 3, and I think most importantly, we must commit to work together. Isn't it? Yes, we must commit to work together, because the nature of ECD is so multi-sectoral. So we have got health, we have got social issues, we have education and everybody else. And we are committing to adopt a multi-sectoral, interdisciplinary approach to the implementation of national policies and strategies that promote national coordination mechanisms. And when I was thinking about what would come in as the other thing, after we have worked together, I couldn't help but think about the workforce. Because when I listened to the teacher issues, I think we are ailing so much. And so I was thinking that we might want to call ourselves to action to ensure specific interventions in relation to how we want to strengthen the workforce at the early childhood level. And I was just quoting the conference communique that says that we shall work together to support the investments in empowering the ECD and development workforce, it's early childhood care and development workforce, and devise strategies for the provision of appropriate incentives, including competitive remuneration, clear career pathways, and continuous professional development opportunities. Now, we might not do the entire long sentence, but we can do something about the improvement of ECD workforce. And finally, how do you plan to feedback ourselves? Very critical, is it? We must come back here. I would love, I'm Kenyan, I would love we come back here so that, I see you. But we are strongly feeling that we need to commit to agreeing to participate in such like conferences, guided by finances and guided by our partners here. Probably we could do it every 2 years. Limit will guide us. But we commit to participate in regional conversations and further review the developments that we have made, and alongside build an evidence base at national, regional, and continental levels. Just those 5 items. Are they good? Are they good? Do we agree to that? Not so quickly, because here we say, will as many as are of that opinion say aye? I'm not going to ask the nay question because all of us must sit in there. So I want to ask us to strongly agree that we move towards that direction. That often you move from such a conference and there is nothing you call yourself to. And I'm just imagining that everyone is picking their parts of responsibility, isn't it? Yes, there is somebody who is an advocate, there is somebody who will talk to somebody about these good things that we have said, and therefore I put the question to you again. This time round, will as many as are of that opinion say aye? The ayes have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's very empowering. And you're quite right. I think the combination of the 5 points are very correct. So I think we have maybe, I know that people are looking at me, but we have 5 to 10 minutes of conversation. So who wants to ask a question? We have 2 things. One, we have been called to action, and I really like the way it's quite straightforward. Finance, policy, working together, empowering the workforce, and evidence. We need to have evidence to argue. And of course, the African Union has given us the green light to say, here's our policy, we need to work within this framework. So, questions for the panelists? Yes, sir. And thank you for volunteering on behalf of the main species. You're the first one to go. Please. It's
Thank you. Mine is not a question but a complimentary. The resolutions that our madam has highlighted, I would wish to enrich them by saying the systems in the government sector, especially with the bias to Kenya, there is a devolved function. Let these resolutions find a way to COG in this country, and let them find a way to the budgeting committee in this country, because we are in the process of preparing the budget, and we will be able to actualize some of this, and the CEC education in the county of Tharaka Nithi. The decisions are already very devolved. So even when I wanted to raise the issue about partnership, is nobody should be worried about partnering with the government, especially when the decisions are devolved, because that worry is not there. It's only a matter of agreement, and you actualize whatever you want to actualize, and we will move away, we will move forward to help our children to realize their future dreams. Thank you. That's a comment I had.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else? There is a gentleman there. If I can't see you, please raise your hand. Please.
Good morning. My question is directed to Madame from the AU. You've talked about a group, what you're calling the group of champions that are going to champion the issues of ECD at AU level. I wanted to find out the criteria that was used in picking these heads of state. Because I know, like, back home in Zambia, our president is the champion in fighting early child marriage. And at national level, you can see, we are able to see the strategies that have been put and the gains that we've done. So I'd like to find out from you what criteria was used to pick these head of states. Thank you.
All right, so you want the Zambian president to be in this committee. So this is a political question, madam. I'll give one more chance. Please. And I think the men are raising their voice to show their presence today, so I'm really happy. Go ahead.
My name is Leonard from the Institute of Human Development, Aga Khan University. AU, two. One is the question on corruption. I know we addressed to Steve and others, but I think you should respond. I think we are stealing children's money. So what's AU doing particularly to address corruption in the continent? Two, 2063. It doesn't seem very inspiring. It's 2063, really. Thank you.
All right. So I guess maybe, Madam, we'll start from you. I think the 2063 question, we leave it at that. I'm also not happy with the question of 2063, I think, but you can respond to it. I think there is a reason for it. Maybe in that shell also responding to the communique. What do you think of the communique and how does the African Union views it? And then maybe we'll also give Janet a chance. Here you go.
Me first?
Yes.
The African Union is a political entity, 55 member states, 5 geographic regions. The issue of inclusion and representativeness is very important. And then from all of you here, most of you who made a presentation talked about something good you're doing. And that good does not necessarily make your country the best in it. And if you talk about a problem somewhere, it's not necessarily that your country is the worst. So in every member of the African Union, there is something good happening in education. In every member, government, in fact, across the board, governments are spending between 17 and 25% of their expenditure on education. And yet, I think maybe 90% of it or more goes to paying teachers. Where does the money come from now to build classrooms? Because we need more classrooms. Where does money come from now for, science laboratories and the ICT that everybody is talking about and flagging? So you're all doing good things, but there is a lot more to do. There's need for innovation, of course, in financing, and I believe it has been talked about. So with that background, the selection of the 10 is not necessarily the best overall. It is, the purpose is to champion, not necessarily that you're the best, but you can pick what's best in your country and use it to champion. And it's a rotating mandate. Every country will have an opportunity to do that, because when you are championing, it's also good for your country. You become visible, and it's good for the cause becomes visible. And well, I'm sorry, Zambia is not one of them, but Zambia is a champion for something else. There are many other things. I think fighting child marriage. I can give you the list later. Fighting corruption. I'm not sure what the AU is doing fighting corruption. The AUC is quite big from one corner that does education. And this year it was the theme. And when it's the theme, it means it is an issue that is recognized, and it means that there is political will to do something about it. So then it's up to everybody now to take it up and say, this is what could be done. So in education, we are talking about how to educate for values and how to educate for integrity and all that. It's already anyway in the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. 2063, oh, you make me so sad to question 2063. One of our problems, and I remember reading when I was in college 40 years ago that, in Africa, they are not able to think beyond maybe 5 years. So they plan that their development plans are 2-year plans, 4-year plans, 5-year plans. And that's a problem because the things that will happen thereafter, we are not so prepared for. If you have not conceived of it, if you have not imagined it, there's no way you can plan for it, and then there's no way you can implement accordingly. Other countries are busy planning 100 years in advance on what to do with African intellectual capital. Some countries are already planning. Our university will be admitting 10,000 Africans, and they will take the best and use them in their own industries up to 100 years advance, and we are thinking of 5, 3, 2 years? No. And that's why also early childhood is so important, because these are the leaders of 2063. If you don't care about 2063, then even here you would be in the wrong place, with all due respect. So it's a change to think ahead and then plan for it, which also means we shouldn't be in a hurry to say, oh, I have a 3-year mandate, so I must achieve something. No, we have a 50-year mandate, therefore what needs to be disrupted must be disrupted, because we have a little more time. The short plans make us want to patch things up that ought to be totally dismantled. So, Agenda 2063, all those in favor say aye.
Thank you, Madam. Just 2 minutes of conclusion remarks, just 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I can't agree more with my colleague from Tharaka Nithi. But this one, for us, especially as Kenyans, this could be the first way forward, that we actually must present this communique to our governors, and probably it will not be very advocacy right to build the individual governance, but we can just consider probably bringing them under the Council of Governors and just doing this presentation. We shall see to it that that happens, and I know we have UNICEF here, we have everyone here, and so the funds cannot be a problem. Yep.
I'm being advocated right now. Thank you so much. I think we can give them a big clap for this wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, and thank you to the audience. I'll pass it to the organizers. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I know that those 2 sessions were, I think they were quite powerful, but they've gone on for quite a bit of time. We are running about 30 minutes late. So we're supposed to do a 30-minute health break. Can we make it 15 minutes? So we can finish up quickly. So our last session's coming up. So please take 15 minutes, get a cup of tea, I think, and get some more stretching. Thank you all. See you in a bit. Thank you very much. Shall we clap for our musicians here? I didn't see anybody dancing though. All right, so moving on, we are running very late, as I said before, so we're going to rush here a little bit. So our next session is on honoring ECD champions. We all know that without champions, we would not be where we are today. Certainly, personal experiences that I was introduced to early childhood development by one Ken Jaffe, and I'm actually surprised that Ken Jaffe is not here. I never imagined a world where Ken Jaffe would not be at an ECD conference. So I think having people who nurture you, who champion for this very important issue that we all care about is very priceless. So this session is going to be about honoring ECD champions as well as some of our departed champions. We'll begin with having two speakers, Pani and Roger Negabar, who are the conveners of the World Forum Foundation, which they founded some many years ago. And I think many of us are here because of the work of the World Forum. So Pani and Roger, welcome.
Seven years ago, at the World Forum in Puerto Rico, Lynette Okengo came up to me and said, the global leaders have decided to organize an African network for ECD. And I thought to myself, that's a crazy hard task. That's an impossible dream. So what I said to Lynette was, that's a great idea. Good luck. So today, Lynette has realized her impossible dream. She has worked hard with her global leaders, other global leaders, for years to bring this moment about. And we can't be prouder of her for this. And many of you in this room, of course, have been involved in this process too and deserve thanks as well. Today also is special because of the enthusiastic participation of 800 early childhood professionals from 47 countries in Africa that demonstrate clearly that AfECN is critically important to the future of children in Africa. Today also, AfECN and the World Forum Foundation are launching the next round of Global Leaders for Young Children. Both AfECN and the World Forum Foundation are committed to developing the next generation of leaders in our field. Since 2004, the World Forum has had 46 emerging leaders from 17 African nations take part in its Global Leaders program. Right now, we are seeking to find and fund 12 new global leaders from Africa who will start their training by coming to the World Forum, 2019 World Forum in Macau, China. So if you're interested in funding and sponsoring a global leader, if you're interested in being a global leader, or if you're interested in coming to Macau and joining with 800 early childhood professionals from 80 nations for a life-changing experience, you can learn more about all of this at our website, worldforumfoundation.org. So thank you to Lynette and the entire AfECN team for making this such a spectacular, historic event.
Good morning. I think I'm the last one who gets to say good morning to you. Good morning, friends, old friends, new friends, and I'm going to be confidently presumptuous and say friends yet to be. Each of us is on a journey, And our journeys have brought us together in this place, this day, this moment. And it's really incredible if you think about all the details and serendipitous conversations, hard actions that have brought us to this moment. It's very spectacular, and it's important to recognize the power of being together. So somewhere along our journeys, each of us has been presented with the opportunity, and we have accepted the opportunity to be responsible for children. And maybe if we knew how consuming this acceptance of this responsibility, we might have hesitated, but we didn't. We took it on, and every time there has been a challenge, we've plowed through it, and we've stood fast, and we've reached out to other people to help us be stronger and better. And we have made our responsibility for children our life's purpose. When you make this commitment, there's no quitting. How can you say to a young child, oh, it's too hard to care for you. It's too hard to feed you. It's too hard to educate you and nurture you. It's just too hard, and walk away, to turn our backs on children. We can't do that because of who we are and the responsibilities that we have accepted. So there's a quote that's attributed to Theodore Roosevelt, but I'd rather think that it was actually first spoken by Barnabas Otawa from Uganda, a professor who helped us build the World Forum and was there at the beginning. And if you know of Barnabas, his great smile, the most special laugh in the world, and I can't imitate him, but he would pound on the table as he said, we need to do what we can with what we have where we are. And I was thinking about that this week, and there are so many people who go beyond that. They do what seems impossible with limited or no financial resources. They generate and bring into and collaborate with human resources, and they reach out to impact the lives of children in their own communities, their own country, the world. They're champions. And today I've heard that they are also the word pioneer used, and then grandmother. So these are our champions, I'll use that word, and some of them have set the path for our field. And our field is new enough that there are people who know the very first people who began making decisions about where we would be today in our path to care for young children. The three people who are about to speak are champions and pioneers in their own right. And among all of you sitting there are champions. There are champions in the making. There are champions known to some of you or more of you. And within some of us, there's a seed of being a champion. So it's important that we don't travel alone. We can't do our journey by ourselves. We need other people. We need other people to water the seeds of our possibilities for champion for children. So we need to, I think, thank the people around us in ways big and small who support us, who mentor us, who teach us, who hold our hand and walk with us. So I think it's really important that this last part of the program is about honoring the pioneers, and that we get to meet all of you, but I wish the pioneers could hear what you're going to say about them. So let's not wait when we have someone who needs to hear that we think they're great. Let's tell them as we go. So finally, I just say to you, enjoy your traveling companions, be well, never give up, and continue to hold children first in your heart. And Roger and I hope that your life's journeys will join ours once again in Macau, China next April. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie and Roger, and we look forward to seeing you in China. I know I'm going to be there. All right, so we have, as Bonnie mentioned, we have three speakers who are going to be honoring some of our ECD champions who are no longer with us. And we're going to begin with Ambassador Inonge Bukisita Lawanika.
Thank you very much. I was also requested just to give a very brief history of ECD. I think the one we are talking about is about 50 years old, but I will do my best to do it in very few minutes. First of all, I want to say how delighted I am to be here and excited beyond really words. I never thought in my lifetime we would get people interested in ECD, from government to professors to researchers. So it's a wonderful dream come true. Thank you very much, Asta and Dr. Okengo, for reconnecting me and for making sure that I'm invited. I'm so happy to be here. Kenya is actually my second home. I lived here for almost 8 years, working for UNICEF, covering the Eastern and Southern Africa before I moved to West Africa. So the history of ECD really does not start 50 years ago. If you look at I don't know, I think sometimes it's called traditional Africa or indigenous. In the pre-colonial era, the children were central to life. And some of the scientific evidence and advice we are getting now, if you look at some of our traditions of taking care of children, you see them there. The care for the pregnant woman, the care for the lactating mother, the interaction with the infant and with the young child. The physical contact with older children, you know, being carried on the back, storytelling, playing, you know, games, role playing. When Zimbabwe yesterday was talking about making toys, actually in this era, they didn't use plastic. Plastic was not even there. But they used clay, they used the reed. It was really rich. So sometimes I think we need to check our background and see some of the important things that we can pick up so that we can carry forth. And I will say something about Leah, actually, because when she worked with communities, she didn't come with the ideas from the Kenya Institute of Education, but she was with them where they are, what they were thinking, what they were seeing, what they were using, and even the materials they wrote actually came from the people themselves. So I just want to say a little bit about the history of what we are talking today, about 5 decades of ECD. It was very sporadic. There was no support from government, and as I told you, no support from the universities. They said it was not academic. I remember even in Zambia trying to say, can we teach early childhood? For us, we are immunization. You go for education, they say, for us, we pick up children at 7 years. But as we struggled and continued, we got a few friends. Among them was UNICEF, and then, of course, the Bernard Van Leer Foundation. And in those days, actually, World Bank was not involved. In UNICEF, we had a lot of discussions with them, and we labeled them as people who were not interested in human beings. But after the Education for All conference and the Health for All, they got some humanity in them. And today we are talking about stakeholders and consultations, and those things were not there before. Let me run through just a few countries and see what we did. Every time we encountered a problem, we tried to address it. We didn't wait for government. We didn't wait for friends. In Kenya, I came in 1980. down that story and read it to them. The other thing that we did in Kenya, when I was the head of UNICEF in Kenya, I discovered there were actually children in prison. We had, I think, a British law where if a pregnant mother were nursing, is it too loud? So I went to prisons and said, how come you are keeping young children in prison? And they told me, well, it's the courts who send them here. So I went to the courts, and they said it's the police who bring them there. So fortunately, I had some friends in the League of Fraternity. We organized the workshops for the police, for the judiciary, and for the prisoners. And we made a lot of noise. There was headlines in the newspapers. And then some of the mothers, it was just petty crime. So that's how in Kenya they started saying for a petty crime, you can save outside. So these are some of the things that we did in Kenya. In Botswana, the permanent secretary didn't like me. He always complains there comes that UNICEF lady. So one day I asked him, permanent secretary, where did you grow up? And he said, I grew up in my village with my grandmother. Then I said, what did you do? He said, we used to play here, chess beds here, do that. I said, P.S., that is early childhood care and stimulation. That is why you are permanent secretary today. And I told him the other children are on the street, they have no grandmothers, and Botswana will die. And one most exciting thing about the PS, you talked about Professor Barnabas Otala. He was in Botswana at the time, one of the Africa's top child development experts. He used to play golf with a permanent secretary. So I talked to Barnabas, who befriended the PS. You know, that's how we used to work. We just had to find a way out of it. And then Botswana actually ended up with a college for what they used to call preschool teachers, although it had no policy, no government, but they were training for anybody who could take them. In Lesotho, I befriended their majesties, King Mshweshwe and the Queen. So I used to go around the centers with the Queen herself, who was very interested. And one of our friends in Lesotho was very influential even in the kingdom. In Swaziland, UNICEF gave the education officer in charge of early child, they gave her a car, and the Minister of Education seniors didn't have a car. But because of her transport, that's how we ended up befriending the Ministry of Education. In Mozambique, we found out that women actually were working on cashew plantations with babies on their back, and they left the rest of the children at home. So we talked to a cashew company. They were very nice. They changed their policies. They started having a preschool that was moving with the mothers. In Nigeria, we saw that the children were always in the market the whole day because the parents, the mothers were there. So we lobbied, and markets were started right in the marketplace. So these are a few of the things. That's how we operated. We actually, and in Ethiopia, they had this huge orphanage with hundreds of infants. When we visit them, they were not talking, they were not walking when they were supposed to walk. There was just absence of humanity. So we lobbied and said it's better to keep these orphans in smaller groups, family-like, that kind of thing. So we even actually ended up, and I remember Dr. Luso Mondi from Kenya and a few others, we actually drafted the charter for the African child, for the Organization of African Unity. They didn't ask us to do it. Nobody was doing it. We knew it was important, so we did it. And that is the history of that charter. Zambia is an amazing story. If I had time, I would tell you how they used to say, there she comes again, they'll close the doors and so forth. So we started a preschool movement. We went on radio. We went on television. Every time there was an agriculture show, we went there, took a slot. Then we were writing papers. We did a lot of things. The only friend we had was UNICEF. And then the first training for teachers, we had to go to the business and professional women to help us train the teachers, because the government would have nothing to do with it. Then we asked a theological college to train the teachers. And the good news today is that early childhood is in the university, it's in teacher training colleges, that kind of story. When I worked with UNICEF, there was no African government with a policy on children. And the good news is that today, every country has a national policy on children. And part of our networking from Kenya was to put up a magazine called Watoto wa Africa. 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. I can go on, I'm glad. But anyway, so this magazine was connecting everybody in the continent who was working for children. So now let me come to Leah. Her experience with children actually started when she gave birth to twins. The day she gave birth to twins, the other woman gave birth to triplets. So between the two of them, they had 5 babies. So that is how Leah was baptized into ECD. And then Leah and her husband divided the twins at night. So Ben was also involved as a father. So if this one wakes up at night, it was Ben. If the other one wakes up, it was Leah. But with Ben, of course, you just take the baby, change the baby, put the bottle, and hit the baby back in the basket. And with Leah, there was pampering. But let me go back. When Leah became the head of the Kenya Institute of Education, ECD rose in the Kenya Institute of Education. And she pioneered a community training with our community. They did a food program, organized by the community. And as they were, she and Ben, as they were moving up in influence, up to the president, ECD was moving up. So when I saw and heard that President Uhuru was coming to open here, I thought about Leah. She was personally involved, she was committed, and as she moved with influence, she moved with ECD up to the State House. So we honor her and we celebrate her, and I am happy to call Martha Odundo to come and get the plaque on behalf of Leah Kipkorir. I will give you a hug on behalf of Leah. And I know Ben also passed away, so thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, next we have Esther.
In my work life, I have attended and organized many ECD workshops. I have witnesses here, my UNICEF colleagues, but I have never witnessed a participation of this number and diversity in Africa. Nor have I seen an ECD meeting being presided by a president. The road has not been easy, and there has been several challenges, and several colleagues and committed individuals who tirelessly contributed to this effort, and Cyril Dale is a major contributor. Cyril is from Mauritius. Cyril, I met him in the late mid-70s with you in Onge when we met here in Nairobi with Barnabas Otala.
That's right, yeah.
And then he invited us again in 1979 in Mauritius. Had a passion for children. His career in early childhood spans for several decades. He held various qualifications, including 2 PhDs in areas of child development. He worked with various local and international organizations, communities, individuals, and governments to create awareness and highlight the need for ECD service for children. He was equipped with knowledge and passion for children. His work covered various areas of ECD in several regions of the world, including Africa, Caribbean, and the positions, he held different positions. He worked as the director of School of Psychological Services in Child Guidance Clinics in Southeast Britain. He was the first senior advisor in early childhood development at UNICEF headquarters in New York. Later on, also, he became the UNICEF representative in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. He was also associated with the Joint Child Health and Education Project and advised the Ministry of Education in Mauritius. During his career, he authored and co-authored books and peer-reviewed publications in ECD. After his retirement, he devoted most of his time to the cause of the African child, becoming one of the most active and eloquent early childhood development purportents on the African continent and globally. Actually, Cyril was the citizen of Mauritius, but truly he was the citizen of the world. Cyril was also the major initiator of the consultative group established in 1984 by a small group of donor funding agencies. The consultative group was an early childhood care and development that had grown into a global network engaged in ECD-related awareness raising, knowledge dissemination, and advocacy. They were present until recently, and most of us attended their meetings. After the Education for All in Jomtien in 1990, it's true that ECD appeared in the documents, but it was not that much, and governments kept on saying, governments and agencies advanced and emphasized primary as primary, but Cyril advocated and persuaded for ECD as a foundation and head start. They kept on saying primary is primary, but he said ECD is the foundation. And sometimes he was even mocked for that. Cyril was a man of great compassion, patience, creativity, and still, until his last days, he relentlessly persuaded his passion for the cause of children. I want to present his plaque to Dr. Maya Sonarni from Mauritius, who is the coordinator of the ICQ and ECD Mauritius. He has 2 children and his wife. They live in Mauritius. He loves Mauritius. He showed us Mauritius. Mauritius is the example for early childhood, as is Nairobi, Kenya, for sub-Saharan Africa. Please present this to Rosalind on behalf of AfECN. We love him. We will always respect him. Definitely. Yes, 2 words of thanks.
I wish to take this opportunity to say thank you for receiving this recognition on behalf of Cyril Dallé, which I will certainly take to his family. And what I would like to say is, I wish he were here today. It would have been his dream come true that ECD is no longer in the margin. Thank you so very much.
What a beautiful tribute. Wasn't that beautiful? And I felt tears in my eyes. All right, our last presentation will come from Professor Robert Sopel. Please.
Jambo works in the morning and the afternoon, right? Muribranji, Mwavombeni, and all the other ways we could say it. Nice to see what a large proportion of this gathering have come together again at the end of the day. This has been a very exciting gathering. And as with Cyril Dallé, whom I had the great pleasure of knowing, not well, I didn't work closely with him, but enjoyed every time we met. I know that Barmen Samanang would have wanted to be here today. Close friend of our chairperson, Professor Marfo, and myself. We worked together on many projects. Today he's being named and honored by AfECN as an ECD champion. He's also known as an Africanist. He's known as a critical theorist, as a policy advocate, and as an educator. His base was in Cameroon, where he was born and raised, but his higher education was in Nigeria, so he already started developing that wider global platform in his higher education training. Something I didn't mention on the slides but has been striking me listening to the presentations this morning, he was a health professional first. His first diploma and his first degree were in nursing. So he was a pioneer of men in the field of nursing, which is, as we all know, an important dimension of gender in health provision. Bama's career was centered in Africa socially, politically, and epistemologically, through critical engagement with policy proposals and practices by social scientists, by policymakers and educators regarding appropriate ways of designing services in Africa. And his career involved a sustained and productive commitment to nurturing endogenous African scholarship on child development and education. In the World Bank book, which I'm sure many people here are familiar with, called Africa's Children, Africa's Challenge, Bama wrote a rather provocative chapter entitled Myths in brackets, Understanding ECD in Africa. I suspect that he was asked to write about understanding and decided to put in that myth to get his point across, right away in the title. The force of local and imposed motives. It's a wonderful chapter, but I've just pulled out one pair of statements which I think summarize its argument. And this is Bame speaking. African parents raise culturally competent infants and toddlers according to a different set of standards, most of which have not been theorized or formulated into ECD policy. ECD stakeholders in general, and African policy planners, researchers, and practitioners in particular, need to open up creatively to that reality. And Samanong's response to this challenge in the context of Africanizing psychology was firstly to theorize key parameters of endogenous African practices and ethno-theories of child rearing in their eco-cultural context. Secondly, to identify systematic strengths of practices within that theoretical framework. And finally, to advocate for their inclusion in the design of progressive interventions, such as education, health promotion, and counseling, and most of all, in early childhood care and education. His theorizing is very thoroughly laid out in his classic book, Human Development in Cultural Context, published in 1992. And this is the summary I gave to one of my graduate classes at the University of Zambia last month. His theory of African social ontogeny is that the growth of social selfhood follows 7 phases, each characterized by a distinctive developmental task defined within the framework of the culture's primarily socio-affective developmental agenda. As an applied scientist, Samanong aspired to build up a regional cadre of respected experts. And some of those are here today, I know. I won't ask them to stand up, but you know who you are. Experts whose theoretical understanding of human development is grounded in first-hand experience of indigenous child-rearing practices and in direct communication with indigenous parents and community elders. A group of experts to advise national governments and development agencies on how to connect with indigenous stakeholders and to generate sustainable, progressive social change. One example of this was the series of workshops which he launched in 1992, and his vision for that, in the publication he wrote after the first of these conferences, is as follows. It is an effort, as he saw it, to open up African developmentalists to each other and to the international psychological community, and to initiate a network, we heard so much about networks today, for information exchange and stimulation of an African presence in the arena of international developmental science. The series, as you can see from this list, went around the continent, and it was only once in Francophone Africa, in Côte d'Ivoire, but it has been in 10 different African countries, and the participation has grown. Last time I saw Bame was in October last year at the Ghanaian meeting hosted by Dr. Kwesi Wilson, and the participation there, I think, was from 20 different African countries. So you can see him here. I put some arrows in. You can spot him in each of these conferences, in Kampala in 2000, in Nairobi in 2009, in Johannesburg 2006, in Lagos 2013, and last year in Ghana. And the other person apart from Bami and me in that picture is Professor Ann Peterson, who was the past president of the ISSBD. In the bottom left-hand corner is an earlier past president, Professor Rainer Silbereisen. Yeah. Oh, okay. So part of his critical engagement with policy was done through consulting and representational work in the UN system. You can see here that he worked with UNICEF, with WHO, with the World Bank, and more recently with, I can't pronounce, Waka, is it? And ROCARE, these long acronyms that we have for our new organizations. I want to just end with something about his vision as an educator. One of his last great projects was a volume which he recruited authors from 10 African countries, brought them together to write 36 chapters, and this handbook is accessible online, so all you need to do is put in the name Nsamanang, if you can spell it, and handbook, and you will find it, and you don't need to pay anything to download it. And in the very stirring preface to it, Nsamanang and his colleague Therese Chombe write, "The teacher must prepare to walk in both worlds of indigenous knowledge and received imported knowledges and techniques. The generative curriculum model enables you to focus on the co-construction of concepts and practices relevant to school learning in the local community through the consideration of both indigenous and Western knowledge systems. This format invites you to become an active partner in the renewal of Africa and the co-creation of culturally relevant understandings of African education that is poised for exchanges within international educational discourse networks and global knowledge waves." So I invite anybody who is interested in addressing that agenda further to consider submitting a contribution to the special section of the Journal of Psychology in Africa, which will be appearing next year. And there's already a group of authors working on their chapters, but we would certainly welcome additional suggestions. Thank you for your attention. And we have here the World Bank representative to Cameroon, Mr. Che, Charles Che. Who knows the family of Bame Nsamanang, as do I, and has kindly agreed to take this award back and give it to the family.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for those tributes. I think one of the things that struck me that Barney said is that let's honor the champions while they're still alive. It's good to honor them when they're gone, but I think we need to make an effort to ensure that we honor the champions while they're still here with us. So again, I have to apologize for agenda. We're running so late, but we're getting there. We're about to conclude. But before we do that, we have a group of young kids called the Little Rock Inclusive ECD, and they want to do a singing game for us. So who can say no to that? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Please, you can step down. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. And this move back. Huh? Or this move back. So make it a warm welcome for Little Rock singers. Thank you very much, Little Rock. I think that was not a little rock, that was a huge rock. It's funny because I could remember all those songs, and the order was amazing, so thank you so much, really appreciate that. All right, winding out here now. We're going to change the order a little bit because we have a number of issues happening, so we are doing now the closing remarks. Our first speaker is going to be Laila Pakala, who is the UNICEF Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa. Laila, please.
Good afternoon. I have to say that group of young children, those kids, are a tough act to follow. And so I have to apologize well in advance. This is not going to be anything as inspiring as those young people were. But really, they remind us of why we are here this week. I would have loved to have been with all of you earlier in the week as you were starting. But I have to say I was doing your work for you in terms of trying to mobilize resources. We had a gathering of all the national committees of UNICEF who have committed, and I'm thrilled to be sharing this with you, who have committed this week to put all their efforts, their forces behind the work that every one of you are doing on early childhood development. And they've identified it as a priority. So hopefully I was with you in spirit as I was advocating for your work. Colleagues, friends, all gathered here today, please allow me to start these closing remarks first and foremost by thanking the government of Kenya for hosting this very important milestone conference. The commitment of everyone here today representing government, particularly at technical levels, but also at the highest levels of government, including His Excellency Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, is truly laudable and an example of what we need in terms of leadership and commitment moving forward. I'd like to also congratulate every one of you, the participants of this conference, for a week of what I understand has been robust dialogue and thought leadership, and for being part of an event that may easily be one of the most relevant and important for young children in Africa in a very long time. This past week has seen the following 5 key elements that are central to the early childhood agenda on this continent. First is the launch of the Nurturing Care Framework. While building on existing practices, the framework compels all of us to consider what we must do to ensure that health, nutrition, education, and protection systems, platforms, and delivery mechanisms are better focused on supporting caregivers in giving their children the very best start in life. It provides an opportunity to renew our commitment to early childhood development, to be deliberate and intentional about what we will do to deliver on the sustainable development goals for young children, so that every child on this continent can truly achieve their full potential. Second is the exciting initiative of the African Union Commission to develop a new cluster on early childhood development and education, which will add the African Union's strong political voice to the growing call for more and better early childhood development programs, including early childhood education. Third, discussions this week have emphasized the importance of paying special attention to the needs of vulnerable groups of young children and their families, including those affected by violence, conflict, and emergencies. This focus on the vulnerable and the excluded should be central to our vision and our work. We must give the greatest priority to those children most at risk of being excluded, so that unequal opportunities in one generation do not lead to unequal outcomes for the next. Fourth, financing has been identified as a key enabler to move the needle on early childhood. Your deliberations have shown that the bulk of the resources needed to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals for young children will need to come from domestic public sources, and there is no ambiguity in this key message. But for many countries in Africa, official development assistance will still also play a key and critical role. It will be essential to support low-income and fragile countries with the largest financing gaps, boost access to official loans in countries transitioning to middle-income status, catalyze domestic investments and reforms, supplying evidence-based solutions for where to allocate money and deliver results at scale. Fifth, your conversations on the partnerships required to meet early childhood obligations have been instrumental. We all have a role in this regard. Governments to take the lead and dedicate commensurate resources, financial and human. Donors, development and humanitarian partners to provide catalytic funding and, equally important, technical support and advice to countries. Parents to enable a nurturing, caring, loving environment for their children and continue to demand for more and better services. Academia to keep producing high-quality analysis and evidence to inform the scale-up of programs. And the private sector to provide an enabling environment for early childhood development within its workplace and continue to call for investment in young children as this makes sense for business, for our economies, and for our societies. But we're gathered here today because of one group of actors that is central: civil society. It is often you, those of you who are here from civil society, who are delivering to communities most in need. It is you who most often innovate, advocate, and agitate for the rights of the most vulnerable. I would urge you to keep on doing just that and not to step aside at any point in time. Taking a lesson from our inspiring conveners of the African Early Childhood Network, I would plead to all civil society partners to consider how best to organize at the national level to influence service delivery, help shape policy and its translation in practice, hold us all to account, and continue advocating for more societies that are equitable and truly fulfill the rights of every child. The Sustainable Development Goals are dependent on a robust early childhood development agenda, and those relating to eradication of hunger, ensuring healthy and nutritious lives, providing quality education and protection for all, and achieving peace and justice are particularly at risk if we do not deliver for young children. It is vital that we walk the talk. That we walk the talk of not only this past week, but everything that you have individually and collectively been working to achieve to date. Because for many around the continent, the aspirations of socioeconomic growth and visions of achieving middle and upper middle income status will be impossible if the vast majority of young children on this continent remain developmentally off track. Africa's development goals hang in the balance. The AU has set its own ambitious agenda for 2063, but even with such an extended time period, we will not achieve these goals unless and until we invest. As UNICEF, we stand committed to do our part. We will work with government partners and many of you to strengthen health, education, and protection systems, especially at sub-national level and communities where young children are. We will proactively support efforts to ensure that early childhood workforces, wherever they are, health workers, social workers, care center workers, and pre-primary teachers are well-trained, remunerated, respected, and supported. Together, colleagues, this is the time to deliver on what we have been discussing, what you have been discussing, debating, and agreeing this week, to operationalize the Nurturing Care Framework, to use every advocacy opportunity that comes our way on the continent, but well beyond, to devise strategies that clearly address the needs of the most vulnerable children in our society, to invest money, people, time, and thought in this key area, and to plan together as partners and a network, to deliver together, to measure together, and ultimately to help make a difference together. With these 5 elements, we have the making of a solid early childhood agenda. It is time for decisive leadership and concrete actions to carry forward what we have planned and discussed. I thank you all for your commitment.
All right. We love UNICEF. UNICEF has delivered for us, and as African board member, I have to say that we would not be here without UNICEF. So thank you so much for that. All right, our next speaker, another important stakeholder and partner for us, is Lilis Janga from Children Investment Fund Foundation.
Good afternoon once again. I think for me, I have attended many conferences, but I think this is the one that is closest to heart. This is the one that I think I could say I am bordering to being emotional. It is, I want to say that for all of us here, this is the most noble cause that you can ever take, because ECD, working with children, is a real game changer of everything. We can talk about poverty and we can try to strike it from different angles, but I can tell you that if we get this one right, a lot of things will just be right. And I want to say that the Children's Investment Fund Foundation is committed to improving the lives of children, and I know a lot of partners here are doing exactly that. And I just want to illustrate how changing this can be. If we get it right with our children, we get it right with our adolescent. When our children, the little children here, grow up healthy, they receive responsive care, they will grow up to children who, even as adolescents, can make right choices, who, as adults, will be able to make a living and will break the cycle of poverty. And I just want to quickly underline 3 things that we talked about in the communique. And the first one is prioritizing early childhood expenditure in national budget allocations and sub-national. And I really want to emphasize this. I know we touched a little bit on this in the morning, and say, if we do this, I think a lot of the champions ahead of us have really opened the door for this, and we know we can do it. And all the government representatives here, I know they will be committed to pushing this and ensuring it happens. And the other is promoting working through community systems and having them as change agents in order to reach all children, particularly in the hardest reach areas. This again goes into ensuring that we are in touch with the communities. And I want to mention that a lot of times we have untouched potential. And in Kenya, for example, I want to give the example of the county first ladies who have been here with us from the first day. These ladies are gems. These ladies are champions. And I'm sure in all our countries, African countries, I know we have such champions that we have probably not tapped into, but it is a moment that we see the potential that is beyond, or as we say, outside the box. And lastly, for all of us, is to adopt a multi-sectoral approach, a comprehensive approach that will bring life to the nurturing care, to that pie that has a couple of things. There is no one of them that is more important than the other, as we have seen during our discussions. So let us all come together. Let us all be part of that change that needs to happen to ensure that our children survive and thrive. Thank you very much.
All right. Do you know where I was last night? You want to know where I was last night? Okay, I'll tell you. So last night we had a dinner sponsored by SAFE, actually. And this dinner had this energy of women, powerful women who change makers. And it was a beautiful evening. I'm so sorry for those who did not come because you really, really missed a fantastic dinner. So who was at this dinner? It was the first ladies of, county first ladies of Kenya. I think about 31 representatives were there. They were very nicely dressed. And they told us all the things that they're doing in their counties. So it was beautiful. It was a beautiful evening. I really enjoyed myself. Except there was no wine, by the way, but you know. All right, so our next speaker is the chair of that association, and her name is Her Excellency Nazi Kivuda.
Good afternoon. It is not easy to speak after such giants, such champions, including the children. But all the same, I think you need to hear our voice, the voice of the county first ladies in Kenya. Allow me, therefore, to introduce the county first ladies, and I'll ask them to stand up, as I mentioned, their counties, so that you can see them and know how serious we are in taking this agenda forward. I'll start with Meru, Marsabit, you may sit down, Marsabit, Kisii, Isiolo, Lamu, Siaya, Homa Bay, Turkana, Kisumu, Taita Taveta, Nyandarua, Baringo, West Pokot, Narok. Did I miss anyone? You know we are many. Yes. Bungoma. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. We felt real honored to be invited in such a gathering. This is not a small conference. It is not. It is an international conference, the first of its kind, and recognizing us, the County First Ladies of Kenya, we will feel honored. I would therefore want to emphasize, or rather confirm, our commitment as the County First Ladies, that we want to take this one on as champions. We will take it on because we know where we sit, we can make a difference, because we are the spouses of the people who lead the counties. And being spouses of the people who lead the counties, and also mothers, which is very important, we have the children at heart. They are here. They are not in how we present ourselves. They are not in our high heels. They are right here. We want to promise that from today onward, we are going to be chief advocates for our little children. I know there is a lot that the county governments have already done. To mention just a few, I know, of course, Nairobi, we heard what they have done. Kisumu, we know Narok has done a lot. We know Bungoma. We also know that there are several, including Makueni, the county I come from. But it's not enough. We need to up our game. And here, me being the chair of the County First Ladies Association, I can promise in my county, and my ECN is here, who is the minister, my chief officer is there, who is equivalent to the PS in the national government, my director is here. Even though there is a bit that has been done, we need to do more. And I'm telling them here, in front of everybody else, that I will follow. I will follow the budget. And I'm asking my fellow county first ladies to do the same in their counties, so that this issue of budget becomes a gone thing. We have to know our priorities. We really have to know our priorities. If we want our country to move, then we must know that the children should be a priority. We must know that it is us who have the solutions to our own children. We should not wait for people, for donors, for partners to come, then we start. Let us start. Let's give the priority. Let's try as much as possible to make sure that we have put a good budget for this area. And then the partners, I'm sure, will even feel encouraged to come along. I thank the partners who have been very instrumental in this, in the development of ECD centers, Safaricom, and UNICEF, and other partners, SIF. We will work with you. We will work with you as CFLA, but we will work with you in a more structured way. We want to see results. We want to follow whatever contribution you give to our county government. We want you to give us that mandate to be the ones to look at what that money is doing and how it has been utilized and whether it is being used properly for our children. We request that you make us your advocates in the counties. Having said that, let me come to Africa. We have the solutions as Africans. We will not wait. Africa is rich. It's just a matter of priorities. And I know if we put our priorities in the right place, then the African face will change. This is the future. The children is the future. The future is now. We are not going to wait until 2063. We are not waiting because we want to start now. If we want an Africa which can be regarded as first world or second world or however they put it, then we have to start now. Actually, we should have started from yesterday. So much has already been said. Emphasis has been given, communique has been read, resolutions have been made. I don't have to emphasize on that. These people who sat and determined that they know what they are doing. What they need from us is commitment. Partners, we are ready. We are ready to work with you and hold us accountable. Because if there is no accountability, then it will be business as usual, isn't it? We have to come away from that culture. We have to be held accountable. We have to hold ourselves also accountable. And with that, I think the world will be a better place. I very much like the idea of a global movement. Very good and very powerful. Count us in. Count the counted First Ladies of Kenya in. Anything, children. Thank you very much, and may God bless us all.
Thank you very much. It's called the power of a woman, right? Okay, so we are now going to have our concluding remarks, and I'm going to hand it over to the government, the Ministry of Education, and we have Martha Odundo to welcome our last speaker. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, on behalf of the Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Education, Ambassador Dr. Amina Mohammed, I wish to take this opportunity to thank everyone who attended this conference. I wish to start by recognizing the organizers of this conference, and the organizers collaborated with the Minister of Education closely, and so gave the government an opportunity to be the host of this conference, which we are really proud of, the first African Early Childhood Conference. So I wish to recognize the staff of AfECN, wherever they are. Please stand. The Executive Director will stand later, but the staff, the entire staff of AfECN, kindly help me recognize them. Thank you. That's a very wonderful staff. They worked tirelessly. Just to reveal with you, to you that this conference was organized in a very, very short time. Less than a month, you can believe it. And that means that they had sleepless nights. Thank you very much. I also want to recognize the Ministry of Education officials that I led to cooperate and collaborate with AfECN staff so that the conference is a success. Are they here? Mr. Lumbasi, Hannah Maina, please stand wherever you are if you are in this place. Thank you very much. Those are the brains behind the conference. I also wish to recognize the Ministry of Health officials who are also part of the technical committee, led by Dr. Kabaka. If they are here, please, you can just stand. I'm sure they are somewhere around. As you all know that early childhood education, for it to be a success, there has to be a multi-agency partnership, and so we work closely also with the Ministry of Health. They were also part of the technical committee. We thank them for their participation and even the support that they gave towards this conference. Moving from there, I wish to recognize the AfECN board that also behind the scenes really did so much to provide the resources and everything that was needed for this conference. Thank you very much. I also want to recognize the organizations that funded this conference. You can see them in your program. There are so many: African Union, Children's Investment Funds Foundation, and UNICEF, so many. Thank you very much. It wouldn't have been a success without you. So I also wish to thank the speakers and the facilitators of this conference. Without them, we wouldn't have gotten the knowledge that we've had in the last almost 3 days. It's because of their wisdom and the knowledge that they've gained through time and the experience that now we are going back really competent and better than we were. So really, you made this conference a success. And also the participants, all of you, you took time to come here. And you've been the same way. I mean, the first day the hall was full. Today the hall is full, meaning that you have been attending, you have been attentive. We don't ignore you. And you are the ones who have made this conference a success. It's one of the biggest conferences that we've held in Kenya. In April, we held a conference here. It was not as big. We thought it was big. But after seeing this one, I think this is the biggest. So thank you very much for coming. We don't take it for granted. The first ladies of the counties, you have made history. Thank you very much for attending and being there throughout. It's not easy. You know, we know that senior officials or these distinguished people, most of the times, they are usually ceremonial in events and places. But this time, you people, you have shown us that the senior officials can also sit, learn, and participate. Thank you very much. You've been there throughout. Very interested, and thank you very, very much. I don't want to forget His Excellency the President of Kenya, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, who came and graced the occasion. We don't take it for granted, and that shows you where ECD belongs in Kenya, because the President recognizes it and even takes keen interest to come and grace the occasion. So we thank him, and we thank the entire government for the support. Were it not for the support we were given by the entire government, this conference would have not been a success. So really, we thank everybody, even those that have not recognized directly. I wish to tell you that each one of you, you were important and you made this conference a success. Now, on behalf of the Ministry of Education, I wish to invite all the partners, all the government officials, any organizations that wishes to do anything with the ministry, just to approach us, come to our offices. We are open and we want to work with you in the area of early childhood education. Thank you very much. At this juncture, I wish to invite the Director in charge of early childhood education and teacher education in the Ministry of Education Kenya to come and close this conference. Thank you. Mr. Moka, welcome.
Thank you, Martha. for giving me this opportunity to close the conference. But before I do that, let me say a few things. So, delegates from AU member states, development partners, representatives, senior government officials present, both national and county, good afternoon. This conference was organized by Africa Early Childhood Network, the organization that is mandated by CESA to be the coordinator of the ECD cluster in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, Kenya, and other stakeholders. The aim of the conference was to serve as a platform for knowledge exchange and skills development with a strong focus on strengthening partnerships and building new collaborations to scale best practices in early childhood agenda that are culturally, contextually relevant to Africa and the Africa we want. Specifically, this conference aimed to launch the Nurturing Care Framework to strengthen global and regional advocacy for holistic approaches to ECDE for us and to help us in the SDGs, specifically in education now, SDG 4, and the agenda of ensuring that boys and girls are ready for primary education. That was number one. The two, to champion and provide evidence for enhanced policy and program development. Number three, promote effective practices in improving childhood education outcomes. Four, enhance skills development for tackling the challenges facing the well-being of African children and communities. And strengthen networks and partnerships for effective collaborations of networks. Given that more than 500 participants from African countries and beyond, including high-level policymakers, civil society organizations, development partners, ECD professionals, academia, practitioners, private sector actors, and human rights activists attended this conference, it is our expectations that the represented African countries have been able to create stronger ECD network for Africa committed to the social and economic development of Africa through early childhood network. Two, enhance understanding of evidence-based strategies in African contexts and the requirements for scale-up. And three, increase commitments by policymakers, funding agencies, academia, and practitioners to scale up best practices in early childhood agenda development in Africa. As we move forward to build the Africa we want, further understanding and knowledge of the components of early childhood experiences for our specific context is imperative. This information will be crucial to the designing of learning best practices that can be scaled up throughout the continent. Your coming to this conference clearly demonstrates our commitment in search for and provision of homegrown solutions to challenges facing ECD in Africa. It is my hope that this forum has laid foundation towards strong networks and partnerships for effective collaborations of stakeholders across all sectors and Africa at large. At this juncture, I wish to appreciate the organizers of the conference, AfECN, led by the Executive Director, Dr. Lynette Okengo, and the Ministry of Education officials, led by Martha Odundo, who worked tirelessly to ensure that the conference is a success. With those remarks, I now declare this conference officially closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The conference is now officially closed, and now we shall stand up for the national anthem for Kenya, and then again we'll sing the anthem for East African community. Thank you. Thank you very much. We wish you well as you travel, and you are welcome also to stay in Kenya and see the only national park in the world that is in the city. So really, you're welcome. Yes? Right. There's also lunch. I'm being told there's lunch, so don't go hungry. After lunch, you can take a walk in the city of Nairobi. It's very beautiful.
Thank you. Hashtag I stand for children. Better future now. Go home remembering these children. Africa Land has been singing here, entertaining you. You have CDs out there. Grab one, take one. Go. Thank you very much.